In this video, I'll show you how to build an AI agent that writes and sends hyper-personalized cold emails completely autonomously for under 20 cents per lead. You'll learn how to auto-generate entire cold email sequences so good that prospects think a human wrote them, how to inject Alex Hormozi's value equation to 10x replies and perceived value, how to automate everything end-to-end from research to Smartlead campaigns using AI agents, and how to use the right LLMs to fact-check, rewrite, and deliver the top-tier quality at scale, all while staying under 20 cents per lead. So if you look at this workflow, basically the only input is the first name, last name, and company name. And on the other end, the AI agents generate a hyper-personalized cold email sequence right in Smartlead, and basically they kick off the campaign for you. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Betty. Over the past few years, I've generated over $20 million in sales qualified pipeline value through millions of AI personalized cold emails, thousands of LinkedIn messages, and thousands of cold calls. I'm not claiming I'm an expert, but I'm here to share what I wish existed when I was starting out. So hopefully it's going to be valuable for you. Please feel free to leave a comment. Let me know what else you want to see in the AI agent world, and I'm happy to create videos around them. Now, let's dive in. So I've brought you a few receipts from the last 2 weeks. You might have seen these in my other videos. So basically, these are sales folks reacting to our cold emails that the AI agents have generated and sent out. Feel free to stop the video on screen now and zoom into these. Now, I'll show you how the agents are able to generate these cold emails, and we're going to focus on this part here. What happens when the AI BDR Tony has an in-depth research from the sales strategist, and how can we get that agent to write the personalized cold emails? We will assume that the AI agent has an in-depth research from the sales strategist that it's going to be able to use. So if we go into our AI agent building platform, which is Relevance AI, we'll see that the only inputs we're using is the contact name, the company name, and the contact email. So this is the parent agent. We're on the parent agent level. And this agent triggers the sales strategist. It does in-depth research using 16 different tools based on its own standard operating procedure. So it does some kind of enrichment. It scrapes LinkedIn, does a bunch of Google search and website scrapes based on the Google search results, checks the open job positions on LinkedIn, finds company technologies, and it also analyzes the above the fold visually. In later videos, I'm going to dive deeper into these tools because, for example, this tool that analyzes website CTA visually, it uses an image to text model from OpenAI. Then this agent also retrieves the relevant social proof. This is highly specific to my company. And then for some reason, it thought that it wants to use the same tool again. But eventually, it generates an in-depth research about the prospect and the company. So we see information here about the prospect's background, the timeline of relevant LinkedIn posts. These are LinkedIn posts that are relevant to my own company, AI GTM Lab. And what we do, we are an AI automation agency in the go-to-market field. So we generate leads, we build AI systems for sales and marketing. Now, we also have some current challenges and objectives. So this is the AI model reasoning for specific challenges and objectives that this prospect might have. Anything else that might be relevant but haven't been mentioned, I'd like to give this option to the agent. Again, in later videos, I'm happy to go into how I prompted the agent to come to this conclusion. And we also see a detailed company overview with innovation goals, digital transformation initiatives, a section on the company's business model. This is important for me because I want the agent later to craft the personalized email knowing what business model my prospect has, because the talk track is going to be different if it is B2C versus if it's B2B. And we also do a notable customer analysis. Later, you will see that I want one of the email touches to talk about the prospect's notable customers. So in this case, it is Indeed, LinkedIn, Snowflake, and Zillow. And I asked my BDR agent to use this information and put it into one of the email touches. Same with the website CTA. So if it is a PLG company, And in Gong's case, that's true. So basically they have a book demo and a login CTA as well. Now the angle I can come in can be something like, how are you converting your users into your sales funnel? So how do you bridge your PLG funnel and your B2B sales-led funnel? And we can build AI agents for you to bridge that gap. And I want to talk about it in the email. We also have a tech stack analysis. Again, this section where I just give the option to the agent to talk about anything that it finds relevant that has not been mentioned before. And we have a section on related company events as well. So these are potentially good for email hooks. So the personalized opening line of the PS line. Again, later down the line, I only want my BDR agent to mention relevant news that are highly relevant to the specific email touch that the agent is about to send out. And then some company hiring plans and job postings. Again, this is a great signal. Depending on the campaign I'm running, I might message my prospect with a hook saying, hey, I saw you're hiring a BDR. Are you interested in automating that job using AI agents? And so your BDRs can move up, focusing on other things that only they can do. And finally, we have a detailed social proof report. So this is coming from our own database. These are companies we worked with. And I want my agent to tell the prospect that we work similar companies to them. And so the agent is going to retrieve the most relevant case studies from the knowledge base based on a bunch of metrics like company size or industry. That's why I call it lookalike company social proof. So we want to share a social proof in the email that is relevant to the prospect. That's why we call it lookalike. And there's a last section, which is the jobs to be done with AI GTM Lab. So again, this is my AI agent reasoning for what might be the jobs to be done for this person with our company. So again, it can be relevant for talk tracks or personalization levers or different hooks. So optimizing go-to-market strategy, enhanced lead generation, and then it's going to go into details now exactly how that can be done. And so this is all for the preparation. So this is the sales strategist. Once we have this report, the agent is going to use this Craft Killer message sequence tool. And if we click on this tool, this is just a preview. We see all the inputs. I'm going to zoom into this tool later, but before that, I just quickly wanted to go through all the inputs. I can collapse these so you see that this tool has inputs and outputs. Finally, it generates a hyper-personalized code email sequence based on all these inputs that we can find. And some of the key inputs here are instruction for subject line. For example, I instructed my agent to use this quick question, first name, style, subject line. We still find that it gives us more than 60% open rate, so we are happy with that. Of course, you can just change these instructions as you want, and so your agent can try other subject lines as well. We also have a company description. So this is the company description of my company, AI GTM Lab. This is something I wrote. And in a second, I'm going to show you how we can control these variables. So what goes into this tool. We have the prospect and company research. This is exactly the research report that's coming from the sales strategist that we just reviewed. So the prospect profile, the professional background, and so on and so forth. Until like all the lookalike companies is then the message length. Even though LLMs are not good at counting words or tokens, at least they have a sense for it. So if you say 70 words or 85 words, it's going to try to reduce the length. Maybe you can try with less words as well, but you'll see that LLMs actually are not really good at keeping the limit. We also have an instruction for the signature, and also how many touches we want to send out, the message type. So this is highly modular here. You could also use this for LinkedIn messaging and signature, and then finally the email touch theme. So this is how you can control the themes of the emails. You simply specify in a few bullet points what you want the agent to talk about. And within this tool, we've given a bunch of instructions to the agent as to how to write the emails, what kind of insights to use in the emails, what kind of personality to write the emails with, the tone of voice, but we specify the email themes here. And the reason for that is that I'm using these AI agents in many different campaigns. So this is highly modular here. I'll show you in a second where we can control these variables, but I can easily change email touch 1 or touch 2 theme. Now, if we look at email touch 3, this is where it gets interesting. So the theme here is we help you get more notable customers. So this is where this tool will have to connect the dots between email touch 3 and the in-depth research. If we don't have any information on the prospect's notable customers in the in-depth research, then obviously this tool and the agent that's controlling this tool is going to fail in getting relevant insights for this email touch. Now, the last touch is the goodbye touch. It's just a comedic flair. Basically, it reveals that it's an AI agent. Again, feel free to stop the video, zoom into my themes. I'm changing these themes all the time to test message market fit. And I find it a great way to do A/B testing. So the style of the sequences stay the same. That's the Hormozi-style value equation. We're going to zoom into that in a second. But the email touches and the email touch themes are going to change. And finally, these are the outputs that it generates. It has a personalized opening line, like, hey, I saw your LinkedIn post, and a quick reference on the post. And then it connects the dots between the post itself, so 300 mil ARR, and getting more sales accepted meetings on a predictable basis, so increasing pipeline, and a quick social proof with a risk minimizer. So that's why I call it the Hormozi-style value equation. The next one is talking about a potential hire that we saw. Obviously, this is coming from the in-depth research as well. So we saw that they are hiring a GTM strategy manager, and in the next sentence it focuses on saving time and saving money while doing more, so automating the mundane and repetitive GTM tasks as connecting to the GTM manager, strategy manager that Gong is hiring. And then a quick call to action. This is like an open-ended CTA. Here in the third one, as we saw, now we're focusing on the notable customers. So LinkedIn, Snowflake, Zillow, and we have a quick question here. Okay, if you could get more of them, would you be interested in a chat? Again, risk minimizer, working on a performance basis only, and some social proof. And then the final touch is just a goodbye touch. Now, let's move on and quickly let's check where you can control all these input variables that go into this tool. So when the agent runs this tool, it will decide what to input into these input variables, and it's going to make the decision based on this structure here. So in the craft killer message sequence tool, we have a bunch of variables such as company name, company description, the email length, and we can set it in the tool settings that we want to make these tool inputs into the agent settings. So now if we go into this craft killer message sequence tool, you'll find that you can control all of these variables that are used subsequently in these tool steps. So I could run this tool now and I could change the input and the tool would run with the input that I defined. But when the agent runs this tool, it is using its own variables, and the variables are coming either from this template or the agent dynamically fills out from the description. You'll notice that these inputs are all under agent settings. The reason for that is that I set these tool inputs into the agent settings. So this is toggled on, and then I saved it. And when I do this, these inputs will pop up here, and then I can use my agent template variables, so the company name, company description, for example. Let's try that now. I can use these that I defined on the agent level. Now I can ask my agent to always use those variables within the tool, whenever the agent uses the tool, that I defined on the agent template settings. So these are not dynamic anymore. These are pretty much static, and I want them this way because these are campaign dependent. So for each campaign, I want to keep my company name and I want to keep my company details, and also the message length, the number of message touches, and obviously the key email themes. So the reason why this agent has used these email themes is because we define these email themes in the agent settings, and under the tool settings, under the craft killer message sequence tool, we mapped these variables into the tool variables. Now again, if we go back to the tool, we see that besides agent settings, there are a bunch of tool inputs that are dynamic inputs. So for example, the prospect and company research, this should always come from the sales strategist. And I gave it a very clear instruction. So this instruction is given to the agent to copy the entire research from the sales strategist exactly as is, without omitting, summarizing, or altering any information, including every single detail, and so on and so forth, right? So when this agent, and let me just quickly go to the core instructions to show you the base model, which in this case is 4.0 mini. When this agent looks at the sales strategist output using 4.0 mini, and also then tries to run this tool, it's going to look at the tool input descriptions here, if they are not directly mapped in the agent settings. And for this prospect and company research, based on this description, it's going to use the output from the sales strategist and fill this in. So when this tool was run, these were all the inputs, and that's how we generated all these outputs. Okay, now I think we spent enough time on the tool inputs and then finally the output. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Now I've hit run this tool, and when it's finished, we can go into the individual tool step. The first tool step is going to be responsible for selecting the best data points in order to generate an email sequence skeleton. So the only goal of this step is to come back with an email skeleton that looks like this. Email touch 1. This is the key theme. These are some of the insights that the LLM suggests us to use in the research. We have some value proposition, social proof, and also I usually like to ask my LLMs to come up with some kind of reasoning. It helps me see why the LLM has decided to select one or the other insight, and it also forces the LLM to make better decisions. And also very importantly, later down the line, we're going to use this output as an input into other tool steps. So we have email touch 2 with the same output structure, and then touch 3, and then so on and so forth. Now, quickly, let's go through this prompt, just very quickly. Feel free to stop the video and zoom into this. You don't have to copy or paste from the image. Just reach out to me and I'm happy to share the whole prompt with you, or actually the whole AI agent system. I usually like to define the agent's role first. It's going to give the agent the main direction as to how to operate and why. It also provides some additional context. So in this case, I already start talking about Alex Hormozi's value equation. And the task of this LLM is going to be to analyze the in-depth research and come up with a cold outreach sequence skeleton, basically. Again, we emphasize the value equation here, which is about the dream outcome, the perceived likelihood of achievement or success, the time delay that we want to minimize, and then the effort and sacrifice that we want to minimize. So these are the value tracks that we want to speak about. So first, it's going to analyze the research. Very importantly, it's going to prioritize the data that is recent. It's going to focus on AI sales agents in this case, because there are a lot of use cases for AI agents. I only want to talk about AI sales agents in this case. I give it an example for how I wanted to reference the dates and the sources. And then it also needs to understand the message type structure. Message type is a variable which is going to be either email or LinkedIn message, something like that. So this is only to modularize. Our company name is going to be AI GTM Lab. Then it has to understand the message structure. So only 3-4 sentences, and it has to follow this structure. I give it a kind of a template that is going to follow, not necessarily word for word, but at least it gives the LLM some kind of context and an example for what I expect. So the template is going to be, hey, first name, relevant personalized opening line. If you could achieve a desired outcome while minimizing your risk, would you be interested in a chat? And then relevant personalized social proof that we share. Alternatively, there's another spin to it. And then we define these different building blocks. So what do we mean by the personalized opening line, the desired outcome, social proof? We also define the subject line and the signature. You can connect the dots here between the tool inputs and all these variables that are being used here. Then it's going to select multiple personalized insights for each touch, because we want this tool step to generate the whole email sequence skeleton. Again, we define these different sections in a way now that we are focusing on the personalization aspect. Very importantly, we want the LLM to note every single time the source and when things happen. This is going to be very important because after hundreds of iterations, I found that if this doesn't happen, then along the way, the agent forgets where it got the information and it starts hallucinating. So for example, just to give you an idea, it's going to reference a LinkedIn post that got reshared by the prospect, say 3 years ago. It's going to reference it as, hey, I saw you shared this post recently and I love, and whatever, the insight that it mentions. And it's very wrong. So just imagine that you receive this email and you're like, what LinkedIn post did I share recently? So that's why we want, especially here at the beginning, because we're just preparing the research, the in-depth research, and we're packaging it up in a cold email sequence style through the lens of Alex Hormozi's value equation. And then this LLM is going to craft a narrative. So based on all these insights, okay, now what can we talk about in the cold email and how can we bridge the different references? It's going to share the social proof. We present the guidelines for it. So prioritizing recency and precision, that's always important. So only 2024 June onwards, or in the last 8 months. And then we have a section here for personalization guidelines. So you can also consider these different points as like separate dimensions of the email that we present to the LLM on a high level, and then it's going to connect the dots between all of these. We also define the message format. So this is the value equation message format. I also define another type of format, which eventually is not going to be used by this tool unless I provide more specific instructions in the tool inputs. For example, to make sure that you use the poke and prove type of message format in email touch 3, for example. And that could definitely work because now in the underlying prompt, we have defined this poke and prove. So we understand the value equation format by now. The two most important pieces are the desired outcome and the risk minimizer. So basically I shoveled everything on the risk minimizer, that is the time delay and the effort and sacrifice. And in the poke and prove, we ask a poke the bear question. Big shout out to Eric Novoslavsky, who loves to use this type of messaging. I'm not taking credit for that here. So this is all Eric Novoslavsky right here. And I also give a few examples for inspiration for the LLM. But it's going to personalize all these questions based on the prospect research, plus based on the instructions that I give it in my inputs. This is the overall story flow that the message should have. So opening paragraph, desired outcome, risk minimizer, and social proof. And we present the email touches. So touch 1 key theme, touch 2 key theme. You'll find these up here at the top in the input variables. And so these are mapped from the parent agent settings. Now, if we go back, we are almost done with this section. Yeah, we are just simply passing all these input variables. We also have some other inputs like company name and company description. Actually, because company description is going to be a big chunk of text, I don't like to input it like this. I usually do it like this. I like to add a clear section break, basically. And then obviously the in-depth research. So yeah, this is not ideal, even though the LLM was able to make sense of it without the section breaks. But obviously we can help the LLMs work with these section breaks. And we also define the output structure. So the way I can make sure that this tool every single time runs the way I want and generates the same output, but with different values, is by providing this output structure. So for each touch, it's going to provide the key theme, the message format, selected insights, social proof, and so on and so forth. So that's why for email touch 1, we have key theme, message format, and the same for email touch 2. Now, after this, something very basic, it simply isolates the engagement strategies section from the original research report. I'm not going too deep into this prompt, but basically we present the in-depth research, and this tool has to isolate the engagement strategies section from the in-depth research report. So this is a very specific section in there. We're just planning it basically. So in the next step, we can actually compose the email sequence. We're still using, I think, Gemini 2.0 Flash. So that's why we're able to achieve these low credit costs. And it's not going to be the best message sequence. If you read it, it's not bad, but it's not stellar. So later, in the very last step, I'm using a Claude 3.5 model on this message here, or this message sequence. And I want that model to make it even nicer, even smoother, with an even better personality. But to quickly go through this prompt, in this section, we give the LLM a very specific personality. I had a lot of back and forth with other LLMs like Grok. Grok is amazing in creating these LLM personalities until I got to this, which I quite like. So when we pass the skeleton email sequence into this compose sequence step, this LLM will take its personality and is going to compose the final email with that personality in mind. And this is super important. It saves us a lot of specific instructions for tone of voice. This is a great practice that I find using with LLMs. Here we present the research and the prepared analysis to use, so the engagement strategies that comes from the previous step, as well as the sequence skeleton. So again, if I find this on this page, you'll see that this is the output variable sequenced skeleton, and we will pass this answer piece from the very first step, which is selecting the data points for the final sequence. And moving on, we have some email composing guidelines. So we have voice and tone and specific instructions that it always has to create a logical story, the maximum paragraphs, and you'll find that I'm constantly passing the message length into the prompt because I want to remind the LLM constantly, hey, keep it under 70 words, no links or emojis, again, a year check, and what we define as recent, the message formats. Again, this is very important. So the context of this LLM is going to be completely different from the context of the other LLM. So if we want to keep the context, we have to say it again. I usually copy and paste almost the same things with just shortened versions into the new prompts, because this is very important, right? And that's because the skeleton will tell us what the message format is. If the next LLM has no idea what the message format is, then it's going to make something up, or it's going to interpret based on its own interpretation. So that's why I wanted to give this context to the next LLM as well. Hey, you have these two types of message formats, the value equation and the poke and prove format. We also present the message structure here. Again, the goal of this is exactly the same as the message formats. So we have to repeat things to keep the context. Same with the desired outcome, the risk minimizer, and the poke to bear question, and then the personalization steps as well. Now, it's not a one-to-one copy paste from the previous prompt. If you go into this and read it, you'll see that the instructions here are very specific to email composing and not creating basically a research report for an email skeleton. Again, important to always share when things happened and the source of that. And we passed the key themes of the emails here as context and basically as an input into this prompt. We present the final story flow and then the output structure. So every single time this tool step runs, we want and expect this output structure, which is basically the final sequence. But before we have the final sequence, and we touched on the language model, I want to pass this into a Claude 3.5 or 3.7 step because I love Claude's copywriting abilities. Before that, we have a cross-reference. We compare the sequence, this final sequence from Gemini, with the original research input. This is to minimize the false positives in the personalization. And this is something that's very tricky. I've run multiple hundreds, thousands of these messages through these agents. And what I found was that for us humans, it's very difficult to evaluate whether the personalization is correct. And when it's not correct, I call it false positive because how cool it looks like that Gong hit 300 mil ARR. But where is this coming from? And so we can trace this back, first of all, to the input. But this input is coming from the sales strategist. And the sales strategist is sourcing this input from who knows which tool run. So we could do an in-depth investigation. But what I found is that we can also use LLMs to do this. So this tool here is going to run another tool. Let me quickly show this to you. So run another tool. This is the tool step that we are using. And we're going to run the compare research with email tool. Now, very quickly, I'll go into that to show you what it's doing. So compare research with email. For some reason, I have a duplicate there. So one of the major inputs here is the research input. This is going to be the in-depth contact and company research, the personalized message sequence, and if there's any instruction that we give on the agent level, then we're also going to store that here. So the way we use these inputs is by mapping them within this run another tool. As you see here is the research input, the personalized message sequence, the campaign-specific instructions, and we map these with the tool inputs within this tool. So the in-depth prospect research will come into the research input, and the sequence skeleton will come into the personalized message sequence. So again, zooming into the research comparison tool, it's very simple. We position it as an expert analyst that examines the provided in-depth research alongside the message sequence. And it has to only focus on factual consistency. If there is something that doesn't look right or factual, then it's going to flag it to us. And we pass the research report in this step, the personalized message sequence, and this LLM will have to follow these guidelines. So it analyzes the sequence line by line, and then it outlines the incorrect figures. If there is anything missing with like who shared a post versus they just reshared, or if anything looks wrong with the dates or any other incorrect factuality. And I'm using Gemini 2.0. And then finally, we have another tool step that outputs the contradictions and resolutions sections, because if you look at this output analysis, you'll find that it has a heading called contradictions and resolutions. And I only want to keep that part because later we will use this tool within the tool to come back with the contradictions and resolutions. And the reason why I run this 2 times is because LLMs are not deterministic. Even though we're using Gemini 2.0, which excels in large context and it has the largest context window, it's not deterministic. And sometimes it can come back with a great answer or pretty much no answer. So in this case, in the second run, and it's just running the same exact tool comparing the research with the email, it found 4 errors. And so finally, we can use these contradictions as a feedback on the original sequence that we composed. And we can pass into the final step, which is going to run by Claude 3.5. Here, I'll show you, for 15 credits. So this is basically 15x of the Gemini 2.0 that we ran previously. But as I mentioned, I still prefer running this because of the style and the tone of voice and the capability of Claude to write these great emails. I give the same exact role to this LLM that we've given to Gemini 2.0. It has a few input components, such as the feedback on the cold email sequence that's coming from the compare sequence with the research steps. And we pass the previous research and the suggestions on the email composing and any other prospect-specific definition that we have, which in this case we are not using, but for certain campaigns, this can be very useful. And we also define the modification process here that is, in a nutshell, that it has to assess every single piece of feedback and it has to implement that feedback based on the research report. So it knows the feedback, what went wrong, if there were any errors, and it also has the original knowledge base to tap into. And so it is then able to change the final sequence that was created by Gemini. And in the final output, we also instruct it to tie the personalization insights with the different sections together. So we want to use Claude 3.5's better reasoning ability here. So not just the tone of voice, but also its ability to connect the dots between the different sections better. We want the subsequent sections, like the Pope the Bear question, for example, to refer back to the original opening line to some extent. And then we provide the cold message sequence that was generated by Gemini 2.0 and also the feedback that we source from the previous steps. And then the output structure, as always, just message touch 1, subject line, and then touch 2 and touch N. So it has to be flexible, going up to touch 4, 5, or even 6 if you prefer. And so finally, we receive these email touches that we've already looked at. These email touches are going to be passed back to the parent agent, AIBD Artoni, once this tool was run. And then the agent uses the Add Prospect to Smartlead email campaign tool. Basically, we provide a campaign ID, company website, and the personalized message sequence. That's adding this lead here, chain-wise from Gong, to Smartlead, adding this personalized email sequence as separate email variables, basically. So it's a one-shot end-to-end email generation. So yeah, I know it was a long video, but hopefully you learned a ton here. Feel free to reach out and see you later.